remarks on behalf of the Clinton campaign. Senator Coons, welcome, sir.
Thanks, Chuck. It's great to see so many excited students behind me ready for tonight's debate.
As you know, this debate is going to be very unusual. There's going to be probably a lot of things slung, a lot of, it may not be the policy clash that or rival the Lincoln-Douglas debates. But let me ask you on what your advice would be to Hillary Clinton when it comes to some of the charges Donald Trump has telegraphed that he plans on leveling against her, and that includes her roles when it came to defending her husband against infidelity charges.
Well, first, I expect Secretary Clinton to do in this debate what she did in the first debate, which is to focus on policy, to focus on her preparedness to be president and why there are so many differences between the two of them, just on a straight-up policy basis. And then second, I do expect her to defend strongly against the charges that I expect Trump will throw her way. And I expect that eventually, after a number of attempts on his part, she'll make it clear that there really is no moral equivalency between the things he's been recorded saying, which is literally bragging about sexual assault and allegations in emails which we don't really fully know that were discussed earlier today.
I want to get to more policy because it's here where if this turns into a policy debate, she's got a lot to answer for and potentially try to explain away these new leaked excerpts from some speeches that she made before she started running for president. But she said in one speech excerpt having to do with you have to have, if everybody's watching, you know, all of the backroom discussions and the deals, then people get a little nervous, to say the least. So you need both a public and private position. Can you explain what that means? Do you have a public and private position on different issues?
No, Chuck, and I'm not sure what that email means. It's the first time I've seen it. And let's just start by being clear that we don't know where all these emails...
You haven't paid attention to these speech excerpts?
We don't know where all these emails that have... No, I haven't seen them yet. But I have seen some general reporting about them. And first, we need to be clear that before we put out as true emails that have been leaked from WikiLeaks or from other sources, that there are credible allegations that the Russians have been hacking into different email systems and servers and selectively releasing and possibly editing things to try and influence the outcome of our elections.
Do you have any evidence, though, that these were edited? The Clinton campaign has provided no evidence. They have not told us these are untrue emails, and they would have, I imagine.
I don't have any evidence that they were edited, but I also don't have any certainty about their source. So I just first wanted to say we need to be careful about taking out of context emails that may or may not be true. Second, it suggests that there's going to be an effort tonight to undermine Secretary Clinton's very strong foundation in policy and her long and clear record of leadership on the issues that matter most to the American people. And I think she'll do an able job of pushing back with what her actual policy positions have been.
Well, let's go to TPP, because essentially what's being implied here, and there's another excerpt on here where she said, my dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders sometime in the future. But the implication is what she is saying now on trade is not her real beliefs, right? That she is, to business groups, presents herself as an internationalist when it comes to trade agreements. But now on the campaign trail, she's, adhering to more of the position of Bernie Sanders. And I think the question, particularly for progressives who are reluctantly on board with Clinton, what is her trade position? Where is she? Is she going to renegotiate TPP and end up being a supporter of it when she gets into the White House? That seems to be the concern among some progressives.
Well, I understand that concern, but I frankly would take a chapter from recent speeches by Senator Sanders, her opponent in the primaries, and one of the most outspoken voices for a progressive position on trade. Senator Sanders has been campaigning vigorously for Secretary Clinton, and he makes the argument for why we ought to be supporting Secretary Clinton. I do think we also, in the context of the little excerpt that you just quoted there, need to remember that the opening two words were my dream. I think many of us can say that we would hope someday that we might have fair and free trade in our hemisphere, yet recognize that the impact on the American working people of recent trade agreements has been far from free or fair. I think it's coherent to say that.
I want to go back, though, to one of these excerpts, and it goes back to the public and private position, because I think it gets to the heart of what we're dealing with when it comes to, for instance, Trump. And that is, and some of his supporters, And that is, it feeds this notion that elected leaders, people in Washington, say whatever it takes to get elected, and then behind closed doors say another thing. Do you see how this is damaging to the reputation of elected leaders in Washington?
I understand that, but frankly, Chuck, there's a huge difference. There's a gulf of a difference between elected officials, candidates who have a nuanced position on a complex policy issue, and the kind of thing that Mr. Trump was recorded saying in what he thought was off camera.
I'm not trying to make an equivalency.
Those are wildly different things.
I'm not trying to make it.
Bragging about sexual assault is very different from having a nuanced position on trade.
No, I'm not trying to bring Trump into this. I'm just talking about the feelings that many Americans have toward politicians these days, that this notion of one thing behind closed doors, one thing in public, that is what gives this outrage and lights the fire among the populace.
That's right, Chuck. Just look at what's happened this week. We have dozens of Republicans running for Senate who have endorsed or publicly said they will support Trump, even though we know they don't share his policy positions. Donald Trump has run for president on positions that are wildly at variance with conservative Republicans over the last 50 years, not just on trade, but on a dozen other issues. And many of them, including the Speaker, have sort of doggedly held in there with Donald Trump, even as he has said more and more outrageous things and been more and more conflicting with their basic policy views. Any Republican who remains a public supporter of Donald Trump after these most recent revelations, I think really has to question whether they aren't also feeding into this dynamic you're talking about, where they publicly say that they are pro-family and pro-character, and yet they are supporting a candidate for president who is neither. All
right. Well, Senator Coons, I appreciate you coming on
Thank you,
and sharing your views. You got it. Well, we're just a few hours from the second presidential debate at Washington University in St. Louis, a familiar location for these presidential debates. After a bad first debate and an even worse 48 hours leading up to this one, what can we expect from Donald Trump on stage in St. Louis? Well, the man who helped him write The Art of the